Everyone has theirs, the games machine that made them, that lured them into gaming, that made them love this ridiculous, terrible, awful, brilliant industry, that they spent seemingly all of their childhood on, that gives them warm pangs of longing right in the nostalgia gland. For me, it's the Amiga. I was fortunate enough to get an Amiga 500 for Christmas back in, I don't even know when, 1989 or 1990. It was my first games machine after my brother and I had begged our parents for one, and I loved it. For years I played it, took in all it had to offer, took advantage of things like Xcopy, look it up kids, and almost wasted away indoors playing the likes of, well, that would be telling, wouldn't it? See, I've put together my definitely scientifically accurate list of games that made the Amiga great, and somehow managed to narrow it down to just 31, which I've then split across 3 videos. I'll put the links to the other 2 in the description when they're up. It was really hard getting the number this low. Some games you love will be missing, I'm sorry, and some you might know better from elsewhere. The PC, the SNES, the Mega Drive, whatever, will be present. I'm not claiming them to be exclusives or anything silly, just that they had an impact on Commodore's machine. So, for what it's worth, for what they mean to me, for how they changed my life, these are the first 10 of the 31 games that made the Amiga great. Syndicate. I'm starting here because this is one of my favourite games ever of all the times, even taking into account how poorly the Amiga 500 version, not shown here, has aged. But good god, Syndicate back in 1993 was, wow. Entire cities to explore, hijacking and driving any vehicle, laying waste to vast swathes of the population, mucking about in a way I'd certainly never seen before in any game. It was and is absolute bliss. Ahead of its time is a phrase I may use a lot in this list, but screw it, it applies. Taking your 4 cyborg agents, or 3 or 2 or 1 if you're feeling gutsy, you unleash them on a dystopian future world, completing missions of varying objectives, some even involving not killing anyone, shockingly. You're kitted out with a mix of weapons and useful items, though mostly weapons, and in what's now known as a formative experience for young Ian, are allowed, nay, expected, to pump your agents full of drugs to make them more formidable on the ground. It's dark, gritty and mature, and I never describe games like that because it makes me sound like an arse. All this couples with a multi-genre approach, management and strategic elements ladled on top of violent soup. Syndicate was a statement of intent as to what games could be. The chaos of a just cause, the freedom of an Assassin's Creed, the nudie robotic ladies of 20 weird anime games I'm sure do actually exist. The fact that Syndicate is a genuinely biting satire of modern capitalism just adds to the mystique, and its utterly amoral view of the world still manages to whip up a few pangs of shock even today. Civilians are literally expendable. It does not matter if you kill them. Blissful horror. Lemmings. A cry of let's go, that green hair and jolly walk, hundreds of them plummeting to their death, the fear in their voices, you, the god of this world, are able to arbitrarily exterminate any and all of their kind you see before you. Yeah, Lemmings introduced a lot of us to the concept of rather extreme treatment of digital animals. Technically, it's a puzzle game with an array of delightful worlds and settings and brain-bending problems to solve, littered with cute mascot characters and from the studio that became the GTA team, DMA Design, aka Rockstar North. But it is also a cruelty simulator. Lemmings is one of the games that put the Amiga on the map. Obviously, that's why it's on this list. While it was ported everywhere and to everything, almost like it was the Skyrim of its day, Lemmo 2000 is so very Amiga. I mean, the initial concept came from something made on deluxe paint, and it doesn't get much more Amiga than that. There's also the influence factor. Without the indirect click and get them to do it control scheme of Lemmings, the real-time strategy genre might be a very different beast. I know for one it was cited as a big influence behind the original Warcraft. Not that that was an Amiga game, but you get the point, probably. Special mention, unsurprisingly, goes to the add-ons and sequels, Oh No More Lemmings, Lemmings 2 and some others I don't remember or care much about. It's been a case of diminishing returns ever since. Lemmings is and was very much of its time, but that first bag of games has gone down in history and will never be forgotten. Sensible Soccer. OG Sensi was the initial game changer, no doubt, but it would be daft of me to talk that up and ignore Sensible World of Soccer. Even if, and please don't hit and kick me here, I never actually got on with the game because all that happened would be I'd lose control of the ball and my brother would batter me about 10-2. Anyway, personal gripes and harrowing origin stories aside, Sensible World of Soccer wasn't at all the first football game on the Amiga, but it absolutely is the best. The breadth of teams and leagues and cups and players on show is bewildering even today, with the unknown minnows kicking it right next to the big boys of professional soccer ball, like, Sheffield Wednesday? It took me a while, but as I grew up I finally got Sensi. It's the speed and flow, the feeling that if you're good enough you're always in control, the unpredictability that serves as a novelty even today in this oh-so-scripted era of modern soccer kicknet games. 1,500 teams, more leagues than you could ever care about, international competitions, tactics editors and management modes are all just neat bonuses. At its core, Sensible World of Soccer is just a stupidly good game. If you don't believe me, believe those who selected it as one of the 10 most important games ever made. Actual proper official people did that. Of course, there's room to give a mention to Kickoff here, probably more Kickoff 2 than anything else, for laying a lot of the groundwork on the Amiga when it came to football games. Obviously the series went terrible as time went on, but we'll always have those original two. And maybe Dino Dini's Gold to a lesser extent. Turrican 2. It's a sequel, it's based on 1001 different influences rather than being very much its own thing, and it's a game that was actually intended for the Commodore 64 first, with the Amiga just happening to beat the original version to market, so there's a fair bit working against Turrican 2 before I've even started here. And that's fair, understandable, I get it. Fortunately, I don't have to make much of a case as to why you're wrong to doubt me, because that music. For all its Me Too stylings and the fact that, quite frankly, Turrican might as well be a Metroid spin-off in more ways than one, where hey, there's a joke for us in the know, there's no doubt in my mind it's an essential title in the Amiga's arsenal. It's one of those games that stands toe-to-toe with anything released on competing consoles of the day and holds its own, giving Amiga owners a delicious taste of the kinds of arcade platforming action they might otherwise miss out on. The original wasn't quite all there, and number 3 was just a bit pump. But Turrican 2 remains one of the true Amiga greats, showing us a world of console-like gaming on a machine known more for mice, keyboards, and, I need to mention something other than Deluxe Paint. Deluxe Paint 2? Yeah, that'll do. The Settlers. This is a series all about PC that's made its home there almost since day one and has continued to flourish, well, to exist at least, until the modern day. Except The Settlers was made for the Amiga and released first on Amiga, though we had to wait an age for it to come to the UK. Obviously it doesn't help that the Amiga's base models were woefully underpowered compared to the ever-improving PCs of the mid-90s and that Commodore, well, died. But I for one refuse to accept The Settlers as anything other than an Amiga great. Right, with that fury out of the way, The Settlers is the Amiga's Civilization, or SimCity. It just is. It's a city or township builder, a sort of god game, a strategic management sim with the complexity and depth you would expect as standard in the now, space year 2018. Just when we were getting overwhelmed with all the studios pumping out the arcade hits on the Amiga, showing it could compete with the consoles, Blue Byte walloped The Settlers our way and reminded us the machine is also a computermatron capable of that slow-paced strategy stuff. I guarantee you there are people out there, formerly children, who learned the process of ore to smelting to forging or wheat to milling to baking thanks to The Settlers. I can guarantee you this as one of those people was me. Laugh all you want, I was a stupid child. Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge. The first two games in this racing series, Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge and Lotus Turbo Challenge 2, so named because it features more than just the Esprit, did a lot to establish the Amiga in two fairly different ways. I wouldn't go so far as to claim the original game is anything like a simulation, because I'm not an idiot, but it does err more on the side of being a serious po-faced racer that shows the Amiga as capable of servicing that middle ground of players who don't quite want Jeff Crammon's F1 Grand Prix, but also who don't want supercars, and oh, there's some foreshadowing for you. Lotus 2 takes a different tack, throwing out a lot of the things that made the first almost snap at the heels of the sim genre, like fuel and circuit racing, instead making it a very Amiga-styled outrunner-like. The thinking there is that it also came to consoles with the second game, so suffered a bit of dumbing down, but I like it. Lotus 2 is an immediately satisfying game, and one that holds its own to this day alongside similar races of the era like Outrun, Super Hang-On, and any other Sega game I've forgotten to mention. I'm gonna break a lot of hearts here and say Crazy Cars 3 became my go-to racer on the Amiga, with the Lotus series losing its appeal as the machine aged, but there's zero doubt in my mind this chunk of decidedly British racing action helped the machine pull in more than a few fans over the years. And I'm qualifying that decidedly British comment by reminding you one of the cheats for the game involved typing in pea soup. Another Liverpool. British. Super Stardust. In doing the research I do for my videos that doesn't involve actually playing the things, reading or whatever it's called, I've found more than one review of both the original and Super Stardust criticising it for just being an Asteroids clone. Well, yeah, but it's that with added power-ups and cool graphics and pumping techno on the soundtrack, as well as tunnel sections that blow your mind with how awesome rad they look. Super Stardust and the original, which I'm only not using as the named game here because it still annoys me how hard it is, was an important title for the Amiga because of what it represented. The demo, PD, bedroom, whatever you want to call it scene was highly active on Commodore's machine, but while a lot of indie games made their way to market, not too many made a huge splash. The Stardusts showed that this was possible, more so than anywhere else outside of the PC. It was such a viable option for amateur devs that Bloodhouse, the original dev team, still exists in the form of Housemarque, which still makes Super Stardust games. As an aside, those modern games with versions popping up on PS3, Vita, PS4 and even PSVR are all bloody good and live up to the that's wonderfully superb quality the Amiga originals first achieved so very, very many years ago. Oh god, I'm so old. IK Plus. One of the purest fighting games ever released, International Karate Plus is a surprisingly tactical take on the batter each other genre, requiring players to score the most points out of the 3 competitors present so as not to get eliminated. Also, you can press T on the keyboard and the trousers fall down. Often, always, forever hilarious. Now, why I think IK Plus is so important to the Amiga comes down to one thing: the genre. The Amiga spent most of its lifetime trying in vain to get itself a game on par with Street Fighter II. It tried Body Blows, which failed. It tried Shadow Fighter, which failed. It tried Street Fighter II, which failed. But all along there'd been something hiding out in the background, something a bit different, something that, I'm talking about IK Plus by the way, something that offered a unique take all of its own. And while not calling the Amiga its original home, called the Amiga its best home. There's logic in there, I think. I honestly think we'd be able to feature IK Plus on the esports circuit. It's that good a fighting game. It doesn't rely on chance or repetition of moves or scumming it like a cheesy scumming scummer. It asks for timing, positioning and reactions to get through its fights, as well as endless headbutts, because endless headbutts are hilarious and everyone should do them forever. And in the game. ZWolf. The Amiga version of Desert Strike might well be the best one, but to me it isn't the finest helichopper-based combat game on the Amiga, nor is Gunship 2000 with its endless menus without words and tactics that involve hiding behind a hill before popping up and smashing an opposing chopper with all the high explosives you can muster. It's ZWolf, the 1994 3D chopper shooter that somehow managed to run on an Amiga 500. I wish I could show you how poorly it ran on an A500, but I'm here playing this on a spec'd up A1200, so there isn't much I can do. Just imagine this, but at about 8 frames per week, then you'll have an idea. Regardless, ZWolf is a technical achievement for the Amiga and the sort of last gasp swing you get from a system when it's on its way out, but developers have really got to grips with the hardware. Just when we'd all written off the machine, a game came out and made us go, huh, now that is pretty impressive, who knew? The 1995 sequel pushed things a bit more, with better graphics, tighter action and all that stuff you usually get when someone's had a bit more time to work on something. As we all now know, ZWolf 2 was the game that turned around the fortunes of Commodore and the Amiga, and we now all live in a world where the Amiga is the one true machine, the only gaming device and nothing bad at all happened. That's not what happened. ZWolf changed nothing, but it did give a last hurrah for the Amiga, at least before it disappeared into the realms of hobbyists, by showing old hardware could still push out something impressive that you just wouldn't get elsewhere. Alien Breed. I find it endlessly funny that the chat about gaming's most difficult titles, the Dark Souls and Cupheads and street cleaning simulators nattering, always fails to mention actual difficult games from the past, like, say, Alien Breed. You know, the one where it was more than possible to completely shaft yourself, get yourself stuck, run out of time, or otherwise end up completely dead through little fault of your own? Haha, all the fun of unfairness. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead of myself. See, Alien Breed and its sequels are Amiga games through and through, thoughtful and deep, requiring you to actually consider what you're doing while at the same time motoring through an abandoned, by humans at least, space station. This isn't arcade shallowness, and the depth of the experience is backed up by some lovely graphics, fine sound effects, and, of course this being the Amiga, lovely music. Oh, and an egregious rip-off of the Alien license. Here's a little secret I'll let you in on though. I love aliens. I adore sci-fi, the Gauntlet style setup of Alien Breed is a particular favourite of mine, and the ability to blow doors down is something I think all key requiring action games should allow. But I don't like, and have never liked, Alien Breed. It's too hard in the bad way, to the point it just isn't fun, and it frustrates, and it annoys, and it makes me stroppy and angry and want to turn it off, and just play Midnight Resistance instead. Ah, lovely comforting Midnight Resistance. Oh, and your obvious special mention here goes to Alien Breed 3D, which isn't one I consider as having made the Amiga, but is one I put up there on the list of holy butt cracks. It's impressive they were able to even do that on the Amiga. I mean, it isn't exactly Doom, but it's surprisingly good fun even now, if you can run it. And that, friends, is part 1 of the list of Amiga games. Tune in, or whatever it is you're supposed to do these days, soon for parts 2 and 3, where I'll annoy you all more by not including that one game that really should have been in there. And never forget how bloody great the Amiga was. Thanks for watching. Please do like, share, subscribe, buy an Amiga secondhand, play some of these games, come back and tell me how right I am, stop weeping that I didn't put North and South in this part of the list, and move on with your life. Oh, and I now have a Patreon which you can find the link to in the blurb below. If you like this video and the others I've done and you've got a bit of change spare, consider chipping in. If you can't or don't want to, that's also fine, I'm still fond of you. I'd like to offer my heartiest thanks to the following peeps for their $5 or more support on Patreon. Without you, I'd be dead, which I should stop saying as it's patently untrue. And of course, a huge thanks to the higher tier contributors who helped me to afford beans and soup. Video Brains, or Jake Tucker, Robbie Sabo, Lola Osman. Even if you're not mentioned, you're good people, and a top pooch. Thank you for your continued support, it helps stave off these unending headaches, though the migrant leave also helps. Bye!